Now that you know who's buying this stuff, now that you know what their perception of value is, let me go in and show you kind of how the industry works and then show you how they all work together within the industry. Now, for this illustration, I just created an exchange because an exchange is basically a place where everybody does business. They buy, sell, trade, everything. Now, in the hospitality industry, they don't per se have a brick and mortar like the Chicago Mercantile or the New York Stock Exchange, but this would be considered almost like a NASDAQ. But there is an exchange where business is done. Transactions are going on daily, millions and millions of transactions. And within this exchange, there's very certain players. Now, I used Economics 101 to describe the channel here. So if you look at the network providers, which are Interval International and RCI, those are the two big players, and to my knowledge, those are the only two. Basically, I call those the distributors. They have the product. Everybody can go to them to fulfill all their requests and bookings and things of that nature. Now, not per se that's where they go to do the fulfillment, but those are the avenues that we're going through. What they had to do is, instead of doing the resorts and hotels individually, they needed an area where they could group the product together, where people could go in and do their fulfillment. So for this scenario, I'll call the network providers the distributors. Now, you have the listing companies, or the developers is what they call them in the hospitality industry. Wyndham, Westgate, Holiday Inn, Marriott, Hilton, anybody that sells resort timeshare. For this, I'm going to call those the manufacturers, owner-operators. Then you have the members, which are actually what we call the end users. You have your timeshare owners and your exchange members. Then you have your online retail. These are your aggregators, which are Expedia, Hotels.com, Travelocity, Cheap Tickets, blah, blah, blah. You know, there's about 50 of them out there. And I'm going to tell you something very interesting about those aggregators in just a second. But for this, those are your online retailers. Now, I call that high retail. Then you have your news agencies, your associations, and your travel agencies and brokers. Your brokers are your independent travel agencies. You have your value-add resellers. These are the travel agencies that do confirmations, they do bookings, they set up itineraries and agendas and everything else. That's what I call a value-added reseller. And then you have your wholesaler, which is what the Vacation Clearinghouse and Exchange we consider ourselves. We're strictly a facilitator. We wholesale the product directly out of the exchange. But now here's some interesting facts of how this industry works. Your distributors are actually owned by your manufacturers. So there is no incentive to go to the distributor and get a cheaper price, because the manufacturers actually own the distributors. Wyndham owns RCI, Marriott owns Interval International. And both those folks are in the business of selling timeshare, so they don't have any incentives to go to the distributors and get more value, get a better price. Typically, if you want the cheapest price, you go directly to the manufacturers. But the manufacturers are in the business of selling timeshare. So when you go in here, you can get cheap costs. You can get cheap prices, but it's always conditional. It's, I'm going to sell you these 3 vacations or this 1-year access, and it's contingent upon you coming back and doing another timeshare presentation. Which, if you've done one of these timeshare presentations, they are brutal. They are 2 to 3 hours long. They always say an hour and a half, but they go even longer than that. You go through about 3 to 5 different people, and they just keep hammering. They're trying to show you the value. I've seen people actually leave these presentations under extreme duress, crying, upset, completely destroying their vacation because the amount of pressure that's put on them inside these. And I've actually seen the sales reps act with such disdain and disrespect because people aren't willing to sign on the dotted line a $20,000 commitment right then and there within an hour and a half. So then you have your aggregators. Now, here's the interesting thing about the aggregators. The aggregators actually work directly with the manufacturers. The manufacturers use the aggregators as a marketing arm. They give them sponsored dollars or marketing dollars, and everything you see within these aggregators is typically within the first page. Most people look within the first page or two. Well, those are all the sponsored ads. Those are the main, because you got to keep in mind there's thousands upon thousands of these resorts and hotels, and everybody wants their name up at the top. So what Expedia has done